Take Bites, where we carve out space for meaningful conversations that go beyond the grill. I'm Kara Smith, your host and fellow enthusiast for all things tasteful and fulfilling. Today, we're delving into the intricate world of product development, regulation, and the philosophy behind creating something that's truly impactful. And who better to join us on this journey than Brian Littlefield, co-founder and chief product officer at Jocko Fuel, as well as trusted board member of CCB. Brian has been at the forefront of bringing innovative products to market, navigating the challenges of regulations and the ever-changing business landscape to ensure that every ingredient and decision aligns with commitment to quality and integrity. We're going to explore the intersection of regulation, ingredient sourcing, and supply chain management. Brian's going to share experiences, insights that'll resonate with anyone who's passionate about creating and consuming products with purpose. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thanks for having me on, Kara. I'm looking forward to it.
You bet. So let's dive into that concept of purpose, integrity, quality. You as, not necessarily an individual, but also as you think about bringing new products to market, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it means a lot. I'd say our brand at Jocko Fuel was built, and that's why there was so much synergy early on, but it was built around trust, and that trust that Jocko had gained from his, followers and fans around the world based on the integrity that he had through, decades working through the SEAL teams and executive leadership training and all the amazing, and being an incredible father. The list goes on. And, this reputation that he built, it was synonymous with trust, and that trust of quality and testing and just rigorous standards was really important to, the inception of Jocko Fuel, and it still is.
Absolutely. There's so many things that go into trust as a whole. But you just mentioned a few, to our discussion of product development, of sourcing. So how do you go about sourcing? What are some of the steps? What are some of the things that you put in place as far as ingredient sourcing with products?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So there's sourcing from the sense of a business standpoint, like how do I go and find this actual ingredient? Going to a network or working through a co-manufacturer, or going to a trade show is a really good idea. So if someone's getting into an industry for the first time, there's a lot of really good trade shows where you can go meet ingredient suppliers. And then there's the selection of it for your brand standards. And so those are really two different things. There's the business side of things, which is like ingredient selection and how to go find those ingredients, which is a little bit more simple in my opinion. And then there's what ingredients match your brand standards. So for us, it was like, let's not use any gray area or banned ingredients. That was pretty easy for us. None of the ingredients that you would find on like a WADA banned substances list, or any anti-doping lists. And then, beyond that, we went a step further and decided we were not going to use any artificial flavors or artificial sweeteners or artificial preservatives. There was a number of things that we had on our do not use list. And it's one of those things where you just hold the line, and it makes product development a little bit more challenging at times. But, at the end of the day, it's worth it because you maintain that trust and integrity with the consumer. And there's a lot of brand value to that.
Absolutely. That integrity, that goes a long ways. Of course, in the ranching space, we're still one of the few industries that can function on a handshake, which is very far and few between anymore. My dad actually still does business with a family that they've never had a contract, and they still don't, and they run thousands of yearlings together. It's pretty crazy from a business perspective to know that those things still exist, but it is because of integrity and trust and the people that go behind it. To those different concepts, as far as your product sourcing to make sure you hold those brand standards, what kind of challenges have you ran into?
Oh man, we've ran into ingredient shortages globally. Like an adaptogenic root, for instance, can get all of a sudden we've been using it for years, but let's say there's a viral TikTok trend, and now everybody wants to talk about, let's say, ashwagandha or rhodiola, and then next thing you know, there's a million companies and pop-ups and everybody trying to jump on the bandwagon, and consumerism is at an all-time high in that ingredient. Well, guess what? Like, the supply chains take time to stand up. So, or they just simply can't grow enough of that particular herb, and all of a sudden you run into a massive shortage on, let's say, a key flagship product that drives a significant portion of your business. That's an issue you have to overcome. So there's ways to do it, but it's that's just one of the many. I remember through COVID, we were pretty strict about our standards of wanting to get aluminum cans for our energy drinks supplied here in the United States. We were very adamant about that. But when everybody started consuming stuff at home and draft beer and draft soda and those things, the consumption of those died, and plastic use, glass use, and aluminum use went through the roof. The American manufacturers had to prioritize their biggest accounts, the Pepsis and the Anheuser-Busch's, and so the medium size and small size guys got pushed to the back of the line, and we had a decision to make. Do we go out of stock? And at the time it was let's say 30% of our business. Do we go out of stock, or do we unfortunately have to look overseas? And we did. We had to go overseas. We had to bring cans in on container, and at that exact same time, containers went from $4,000 a container to $30,000 a container. So that same allotment of cans that we needed for, let's say, that year cost $1 million extra down to the P&L. So supply chain is very important to understand how to navigate. Jocko says logistics wins wars, and they really do.
Yeah. To the supply chain, talking about sourcing ingredients in other countries, I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, as far as the the global landscape, but also a lot of the mantra to stay in America if possible, etc. Like, what are your thoughts around that? Kind of, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, on the Jocko Fuel side, since that's what we're talking about, we always kind of prioritize. So we have like a brand Bible, as far as all the marketing and sales, and like the company organization needs to understand what that brand Bible is. And we also have sort of a product Bible, and in that, it just outlines what our preferences are. We wouldn't be able to be in business in the nutritional and nutraceutical space only being made with 100% American components. I wish we could. Unfortunately, the manufacturing just isn't there. Like, they're not making a lot of the vitamins and ingredients here in the States. Now, what's crazy is some ingredients might be raw material might be produced here, or let's say in the UK or Australia, but it has to go to Asia to get processed, because we don't have the processing plants here. So slowly things are starting to make their way back to the shores. But unfortunately, we have to go globally, and sometimes it actually makes sense, because one of our core sweetener since day one has been monk fruit, and we built upon that. We started using Reb M and allulose, but early on it was monk fruit exclusively. And monk fruit comes from a specific region in China where it's grown on the mountainside in this subtropical climate. It's very unique to that area of the world, and that is where it is grown and where it grows, and we can't really change that. So we have to get it from there, and it is a superfood. It is an amazing sweetener, but ultimately at the end of the day, we have to get it from there. So there's certain things that you have to source elsewhere, and we're okay with that.
Yeah. So Brian, could you talk about some of the other ventures you're a part of? So whether we want to talk from an origin perspective, or even from a CCB perspective, and the American supply chain side of that.
Yeah, sure. I with my backstory, it would take a while, so I'll summarize it. I came into partnership with Pete Roberts, the founder of Origin, and that's how I ended up meeting and partnering with Jocko Willink to found Jocko Fuel. And Origin, for those that don't know, is an American apparel company that is 100% sourced and manufactured here in the United States. And I believe there's a term called berry, and Pete likes to say, my partner Pete Roberts likes to say better than berry, because I think our current standard right now at origin is like 99% American made and sourced. There's a few things that, like, down to the rivets on the jeans that we have to wait months and months and months for, or to get a manufacturing facility to tool up to do those particular things. But that has been the origin standard. I came on with Origin in 2013 or 14 and was with them till 2018 when I transitioned over exclusively to Jocko Fuel, but I'm still very much close to the brand. And it's that's what I'm wearing right now. So it's gone from making American made jiu-jitsu gear and clothing to practically everything at this point for men, I would say. And I think there's a transition for women, in the not so distant future, because, all red-blooded Americans want to be able to support, American made and American sourced at the end of the day, we feel.
Yeah. And it's something that we can echo on the Colorado craft beef side. One of the beauties that we have in this country is how, in so many ways, how we expanded west, of course, with American ranching. And there's really not a need within our supply chain to be able to pull cattle, particularly, but beef out of other countries, to be able to supply the product that we are. There's spaces and there's times where it happens. As you mentioned, business revolves around business and free market and all of the things that go into it. But that's something that is a core to our ethos as a company, is we're able to produce what we have in this country, with a lot of the beauty of nature that surrounds it. But so how does that, as far as we talk about that, maybe that transition of you guys looking at Colorado craft beef, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's why we were so interested in partnering with Colorado craft beef right out of the gate. Once I started learning about the story, that was phenomenal. I loved it. I loved hearing about your generational experience. I love seeing, I still love watching the Instagram stories and watching the girls, grow up on the farm and the ranch. And it's incredible. And to be part of it is something that, makes us all, I can speak for all my partners, that are now part of this thing. We're all very, very proud to do so. And listen, it didn't hurt that, Jeff ruined me when I was going through my barbecue and smoking steak phase, when he sent me the first box, and after I got it and tried it, I was like, okay, I'm coming out there. And so I've been out to the ranch twice now, and we've been working with each other for over a year now, and it's just been, it's been a great experience. We love everything that CCB is doing, and we couldn't be happier about the partnership.
You bet. Us as well. I always enjoy hearing insight from somebody that didn't come from the industry too, because of course I've lived and breathed this my entire life. So it's not news to me that this view is commonplace and all of the cow science, etc. But hearing from somebody who is not, or wasn't in it every day, and the why that you would want to be involved in it, I find to be truly inspiring.
Yeah, it's great. It's an amazing American story. And, on the Jocko Fuel side of things, we know that we are in the health and wellness space, but we cross over into food and beverage. And so we have to be very much in touch with the consumer. And the consumer, I guess what I would say is CCB is in a perfect position right now, because not only does the consumer want more and more transparency on where things are coming from, I would actually say absolute transparency on where things are coming from, and they want the least amount of hands to touch the product before they get it to consume it. But they're also in a time right now where prices are exponentially increasing, and inflation is I would say still disproportionate to income. people understand they need to get value. And so one thing that I was, when I actually came on and started working with you and Jeff, I actually made a call out like, you're undervaluing the product because the product is so amazing. And so not only is the story and the heritage and the experience that you guys bring, but the product to me was everybody was getting a deal and still are getting a deal, I would say. So when I go to my local grocery store and I look at the cost of beef in its, I would say choice grade at best, I'm like, oh, this is why I don't buy meat at the grocery store anymore. And so those things are very important: value to the consumer and transparency on the supply chain, which CCB is best in class for right now.
Sure. You made a comment, Brian, about the hands within the supply chain, whether it's quantity or knowing the face of those hands. That's something that I would say from the consumers, anybody who's listening to this podcast, but as a consumer in general, what kind of advice can you give from that perspective? Because I've heard you give some analogies on even products that you guys have sourced in, whether it's sourced into the supply chain, et cetera, but just the concept of how many people have touched that before it got to you, or the value, as you mentioned, of knowing exactly where that came from and how it was brought to your table.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we dealt with it. We learned the value of it super early on the origin side of things. Pete was amazing at storytelling. It still is amazing at storytelling, but he did such a good job in the early days. I mean, that's really how Origin grew, was behind the scenes storytelling of showing, hey, like if you want to follow the truck with the cotton, you're going to follow it back to a cotton field in the United States. And when you open the doors on your kind of like what most companies would think is like what they kind of have to hide, when you open that up and you make it full transparency, there's a level of attachment and I say trust, but it's actually beyond that. There's a level of intimacy that you get with the consumer that you will not get if you don't do that. And so some companies and some products and some brands can't do that because it's not built around that. But when you do have that, it's such a competitive advantage in the marketplace that if you're not doing it, then you're really selling yourself short. And so I know you've heard me, on calls and in board meetings talk about the need to be even louder and scream it from the rooftop. Yourself and Jeff getting on these social platforms and just making people understand, like, hey guys, like, it's us. We're not purveyors, we're not sourcing this from such and such. And, I think there's a place for that stuff, but that's not what CCB is. So what I would say is, like, we're the same way at Jocko Fuel as we are at Origin, as you guys are at CCB. And that's why there's, that incredible alignment.
You bet. Brian, one thing that we didn't talk about that I would like to touch on from even just a high level would be some of the different regulations as far as bringing products to market, marketing products, especially with under a legal purview. So, of course, at CCB, we have our own harvest facility, which is part of, ensuring our supply chain, securing our supply chain. And we're USDA regulated. But can you touch on, potentially some of the FDA regulations as far as securing additional products and kind of how that landscape differs?
Yeah, so it's really, really interesting. So a lot of people are, again, to keep it as short as possible, a lot of people are under the misconception that the FDA doesn't have any authority over the supplement or nutraceutical space, when indeed that's actually not true at all. Now, what they don't do is enforce it. So I was actually in DC a couple months ago, talking to some senators, and we're actually advocating because, again, Jocko Fuel is one of those companies where we believe we do the right thing, and we believe we're full open book, we're transparency. So it's like if we have an issue, let us know, and we'll take corrective action. We don't think we do, but a lot of other companies are hiding behind little loopholes and using gray area ingredients or whatever. That's not us, so we don't have any concerns. So we want the FDA to do their job. So back in the 90s, there was a shift, and it was called DSHEA, DSHEA, and under that DSHEA, basically all supplements got categorized as sort of a category of food, and gave the FDA full authority over approving ingredients through GRAS certification, being able to send warning letters, even raid facilities if they were not in compliance. And all manufacturing facilities also have to be FDA inspected and registered through CRF 111. So there's actually a ton of regulation that they currently do, but there's a lot that they don't do. And so unfortunately in our space, and this is particularly because of lack of desire to do so and probably some funding, when there are some bad actors, and there's a number of like media teams, there's a group actually called Price Plow, and also Now Foods is, a lot of people are familiar with Now Foods. They're a supplement company, but they're really big, and they're a very high quality product, mostly do like letter vitamins. And so they decided to do some testing on certain ones. One in particular was creatine gummies. And so they tested all these creatine gummies, and what they found was like 1 or 2 out of the 10 or 20 that they tested actually had the level of dosing that it was supposed to. And so they do this testing, and Price Plow does a bunch of investigative stuff, and they send this to a bunch of Congress members and the FDA, and nothing gets done about it. So a lot of people that think, oh, it's the Wild West in the supplement industry, actually, for good or bad, the current policing of it is done by other good companies, and the FDA actually just won't do their job. And so we were in DC asking them to literally step up and do their job. So that's how we deal with things here in the nutraceutical space. Unfortunately, we have to kind of check other companies, and without coming off as that type of marketing. And that crossover to food and beverage, that can get a little bit tricky, right? Because then you have like this is a nutritional product. Our Hydrate is a nutritional product, but our Go, which I saw you drinking earlier, is a supplement product because it actually has active ingredients, and we want to be able to market the functional benefits. So if you're making functional claims on your product, like supports focus or enhances memory or those types of things, you actually have to label it with a supplement facts panel. So it's all about the panel on the back of the product. So if it's a nutrition facts panel, it has one level of regulation. If it's a supplement facts panel, it has a different level of regulation. And so it can be a little bit nuanced. And let me just say, we keep the lawyers fat and happy, making sure that we're staying in compliance. But yeah, we don't often cross over into the USDA space much. We will when we're working with dairy sources, of course. And so when we're talking about proteins or ready to drink protein, depending on the sourcing of those raw materials like whey protein and whether it be concentrate or isolate, casein, of course, egg is in our protein powder, those things, then some of that starts to tiptoe into the USDA, but we don't have much interaction with them often.
So that's fascinating. You mentioned not everything is as it seems always, particularly when it comes down to some of these nuances. And to speak from the USDA side, not from their side, but from ours, of course, being a USDA harvest facility, is we have USDA inspectors on site when we harvest cattle. I mean, so there is true oversight as far as, an individual there making sure that we have humane handling of cattle, food safety is top notch, all of the regulations that go into USDA. which is, another level. When we were bringing the beef sticks to market, very similar. We did all of the nutritional facts. We sent them off to a third party, had to get the USDA to approve all of the claims. We had to substantiate the claims, all of the nutrition pieces of it. It's definitely can be a little different from a regulatory aspect, depending on what world you're in. But I think it's a great point of not everything is always as it seems, to make sure you know where what you're consuming comes from. I think is an important piece of the puzzle for our listeners. So Brian, any closing thoughts from that perspective of, hey, consumers, like, think about this. Maybe this should be the top of your list, or some other nuances that you want to share?
Yeah, not really. Nothing off the top of my head. I'd say, as far as I think consumers are, I guess I would leave it with this. I'm thankful that consumers are waking up and starting to be more skeptical of things that they may not have been in the past. The deceptive practices of the past. If there's any good, I guess I would say, of what came out of COVID, it's that people have a healthy level of skepticism now and are starting to use their critical thinking skills. I think not everyone, listen, I'm not speaking for the masses, but I think a lot more people than previous are doing so. And I think that's a good thing. And so I think that the more people care about where their food or supplements or beverages or clothing come from, the better it's going to be, because it's going to drive a better consumer behavior. And when you drive a better consumer behavior, companies have to follow, and it's just better for the country as a whole.
You bet. It does matter where all of these things come from, and it matters the hands who produce them. And every time a consumer buys something, they're voting with their dollar. So ultimately that makes a big impact.
Right. Yep.
All right, Brian, I appreciate your time today. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with some food for thought. In a world where every choice matters, let's approach consumption with mindful intention. Seek knowledge, engage in conversations, and shape your legacy with purpose. This is Kara Smith signing off Steak Bites Podcast.